One of the most difficult secrets I have to keep at the Loft Literary Center is who the judge for the McKnight is. And it's especially difficult when that judge is Nikky Finney. Nikky Finney was born in South Carolina within listening distance of the sea. A child of activists, she came of age during the civil rights and black arts movements. At Talladega College, nurtured by Hale Woodruff's Amistad neurals, Finney began to understand the powerful synergy between art and history. Finney has authored 4 books of poetry: Head Off and Split, The World is Round, Rice, and On Wings Made of Gauze. The John H. Bennett Jr. Chair in Southern Letters and Literature at the University of South Carolina, Finney also authored Heartwood, edited The Ringing Ear, Black Poets Lean South, and co-founded the Afro-Latin Poets. Finney's 4th book of poetry, Head Off and Split, was awarded the 2011 National Book Award for Poetry. And my reward for keeping this secret for all these months is I told myself, you get to hear Nikky Finney read. And so we're all here tonight. Let's please welcome Nikky Finney.
Wow. Thank you very, 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 very much. I was here for the first time a long time ago. I think I had 2 books out, and the place was not under construction. But I was telling somebody when I walked in that the audience that night remains for me a standard in audiences. I was a young poet who had never stood before an audience of such passionate readers. And so I found the Q&A to be my favorite part of the entire evening because you asked such great questions. And so I'm telling you that now because the pressure is on. No pressure. It's been 10 years, so. I'm honored to be here, and I was honored to choose such brilliant writers at different stages of their careers. That was a highlight for my year. The actual invitation to come came from, what was his name, Bao? Jared, at the reception for the National Book Awards in 2011. So it's been a long time coming, but it's been absolutely worth the wait. So thank you for coming out tonight. One of the things that I've always wanted in my life was a son. I did not get to have that wish. And I told an audience that once, and a friend was in the audience. Her name was Lorna Goodison. She's a Jamaican writer. And she sent me a picture. You know, you go to Jamaica and you go into the gift shop, and you see these local drawings, sometimes on wood. And in one way, this particular drawing looked just like he could have been my son. So when I received it, I nailed it into the wall behind my bed. Lobengula, her wall-bound child. Behind my side of the headboard, my son sleeps with me, both eyes frozen open all through the night. When I make queen-size love in a woman's pot of heat, or dream a fetal curl around a word, frenzied to finalize a line, his glass-housed body tap-taps against the wall. His brown ocean face becomes a dandelion tree, and I blow him around with my eyes. Seeds fly between us. We scandalize the room, his tiny, invisible voice, always the pollinating one. Mommy, he says, you're trying too hard again. Each time he opens his floating mouth, a black bunched web of his boyish silk skates across the air. My new mother's netting stretches out to hold, fragile as 10 teacups full of a baby's first breath. Lobengula has my ropey hair, my spacey teeth, my love for precision, but wears someone else's tentative smile, looking something, but nothing like me all at once. He is a found child in an airport gift shop in Kingston, covered in island sugarcane dust, then mailed to me duty-free way back across the water. He arrived with gift card still tied to his framed wrist, a name tag whispering on a summer train, a child on the move between families, and you thought you'd never have a son. Love, Lorna. He is all the brown-faced boy I will ever have, all I will ever nail Jesus high into a birth wall. I have missed ever knowing him, missed marking his height off on the kitchen wall, missed lip-kissing my morning worry into the mitt of his hand, shining my nose into his sleeping high school breath in search of homemade wine, guzzled, he finally confesses, in the bus lot between state championship quarters. Who is that? Wanderers to my bedroom want to know. That is my son. He lives behind me where I sleep. He is a wall-bound child. What is a wall-bound child, they ask, and when did you have one? It means if he leaves the air in this room, he will die without me. But he is too big to still sleep with his mother. What will people say? People say. They will say I am unfit to have a son that can never leave his mother's room, but they will be so wrong. He came in right on cue. That was perfect. It's perfect. You taught him that. Oh, yes. I love poems that remind you of things that you might miss during the day. And there was a moment where I had an aunt who was had been in a nursing home for about 5 years. And this was the story of my visits with her. It's called Mean Nina. I like to bring sort of disparate things together. So here's this moment of going to the nursing home. And I was also thinking about how my brother said to me once that we come from a family, specifically a family of mean women. I never thought about it quite like that, but there is some truth to it. Lying there in state when I arrive is great Aunt Nina, Nina of the pear gum trees, of the old, old ways, seamstress of flowers so fine, thread laid to silken seed inside the eyelids of raw cotton. Nina Davenport could sew the wing back on a butterfly, make them rise, cocoon, bloom again, on every arm of every chair in the old home house. Her linen butterflies fluttered, her needles pursed a power. Lying there now is mean Aunt Nina, who won't die. Nina the general, sergeant maiden of the farm, distributor of all good back-breaking work within a 5-mile radius. Mean Nina, devoted sister of Daisy, the sweet. I lift the sheet to see what lies left of you. What shakes out is one long as me, crooked, trembling bone. You are without clothes from the waist down, the diaper stamped large adult, a middle passage insignia. My eyes run headlong into a summer afternoon shower. Wet, they whisper to me, don't keep me here this long. I cover back up the protruding pelvic bone that was once your black woman's saucy hip. I keep my hand on you posting family messages through the fingers all along your body board. They never touch you here. They change your diaper when they please. Their latex hands rake your Indian hair and what should be saved for mules and archaeological digs. I look inside your table drawer. The soft brush that Mama brought last Thanksgiving Day is gone, disappeared with all the other nice things. I turn to stampede the office like all the times before. I want to know, how can they steal from a woman who won't die? but your eyes fall on me like a shaft. Don't, child, you say. You get to go, and I get to stay. You don't know the half of mean, you say, when nothing but your mind can leave the room. She tells me, finally, there is good news. She insists I take word of it back to the family, how she is no longer the meanest woman in the world. She says the new night nurse, the one called Little Mary, is. Little Mary, who never looks me in my eye. Every time she comes into the room, Aunt Nina stops whatever she is saying, turns her voice into a needle, searching for the jugular of little Mary's ear. One day, she says, you will be old. You will. All day she thinks and stares, rolled up fetal, unable to go anywhere except in her head. Every day staring down the wall as it grows from dark to light. No corn to shuck, page to turn, thread in to lick. She remembers how mean to everyone she was. Mean Nina. Mama and the rest of us whisper every time the car pulled into the yard before walking into her house of butterflies and fresh pole beans. That was when Nina Davenport could walk away from you with great purpose, when everybody thought she would just die easy like the rest of us. Teacher, farmer, spinster. She surprised everybody and married a short man once. The land needed a man's back for a whole season, and all the other hired hands had escaped one night or another. Eventually, he fled too. That Sunday, the new pastor said, meanness never wears down easy. With his hand pummeling the gospel plow, meanness, he swore, can last longer than plastic. I grew up scared of her, but that was before, when I thought she would just die regular. Back then, I would fly out of her way like a biddy in a barnyard. Now that she is flat on her side, buckshot like a red fox, I stand as close as I can, amazed that something, finally, has laid her meanness down. On the outside, Nina Davenport is helpless, but on the inside, she is whole. Little Mary knows her body is bad, but also knows her mind is perfect. She hates her because Aunt Nina won't go on and go. Because the other ones always give up easy and die quick. On Sundays, Aunt Nina prays out loud for lightning to come to strike them all down. She clarifies, this is not further evidence of more meanness, just everlasting belief in the power of prayer. Whenever Queen Mary enters the room, she walks right over and closes the drapes first thing. Aunt Nina's 40-year teacher's pension pays the bill each month. She doesn't care about the money going up like smoke, only about giving up, of them winning. She says her bones are completely castor oil now. She says this proud like a soldier still cleaning her gun between battles. When I stand there, beside her, she recites Robert Frost, summons the Battle of Fort Sumter, remembers the capitals of all the states. She asks me to sing them back to her. I know she is memorizing herself back to life. She mumbles out recipes that won't work without fresh churned butter in the 29 places on 500 acres where she planted heirloom pears that still pop out and fall to the red ground, her hands no longer caramel cupped doilies, saving them from the rabid groundworms. Then there are all the names of all the neighbors come and gone. Then every year of every flood and which house it took down the river. Then which summer the tornado laid everybody down in the snake ditch like pine board. One crooked row of outstretched prayers, a family of drenched sin, rising finger first to the crazy sky. Her mind perfect, her body long dead. Here at the end, she only wants one thing. She asks if I've remembered to bring it. I reach into the bag and I sit it on the nightstand. Aunt Nina strains her eyes to see. I tear off the wrapper. I hold it out for her long inspection. She inhales, sighs, is so disappointed. It used to smell meaner than that, she says. She runs her fingers across the slippery, sunken word, life boy. I warm the face cloth and slowly wash around her neck and temple. She quivers when I touch inside her ears. Her nose widens, smelling salvation, and her eyes close, remembering something private, something I can never, ever know. I tell myself only this old soap and 90 years of mean can do this to a woman, make her feel something so old, so new, here at the end. I dry her off easy with the good towel that Mama gave me, then uncap the blue top off the white opaque jar. She bends her nose my way to test. Her eyes close while everything turns sepia. The Pond's cold cream covers my 2 pointing fingers like an old woman's icing. Her skin dines. I know that what I bring to her in my paper sack is her only pleasure, the way she remembers how not to die. She turns her face up to me when I am finished. I rub around her tinted eyes again before I go. I know I am tending to the beveled glass of a raised cathedral. She touches my arm. She says, I guess I got to pay for all them mean days. I lie to her. I say, no, ma'am. One of the things I like about coming here is I feel like I can read my quiet poems. I'm not sure what that means, but every time, I try not to decide what I'm going to read until I get here, and every time, not that it's been more than 3 times, but every time I want to read the quiet poems that I rarely read for some reason, because I don't think everybody can hear them, and I'm not sure what that means. So that's a compliment. So I was in Philadelphia doing a reading just like this on a cold night, just like this, and a woman walked into the back of the room, and she did not take her coat off or her scarf, and she just stood there. And then she came up to me after the book signing, and she said the line that is the epigraph for this poem. She said, hey, you write like a black woman who's never been hit before. The Girlfriend's Train. I read poetry in Philly for the first time ever. She started walking up all the way from in back of the room, from against the wall she came. Big coat, boots, eyes soft as candles in 2 storms blowing. Something she could not see from way back there but could clearly hear in my voice. Something she needed to know before pouring herself back out into the icy city night. She came close to get a good look, to ask me something she found in a strange way missing from my black woman poetry. Sidestepping the crowd, ignoring the book signing line, she stood there waiting for everyone to go, waiting like some kind of representative. And when it was just the 2 of us, she stepped into the shoes of her words. Hey, she said, you write real soft, spell it out kind, no bullet holes, no open wounds in your words. How do you do that? Write like you've never been hit before. I could hardly speak. All my breath held ransom by her question. I looked at her and maybe thought, maybe there was a train on pause somewhere. Maybe just outside the back door where she had stood listening. A train with boxcars that she was escorting somewhere when she heard about the reading and came in. A train with boxcars carrying broken women's bodies, their carved-up legs and bullet-riddled stomachs, momentarily on pause from moving cross-country. Women's bodies, brown, black, and blue, laying right where coal, cars, and cattle usually do. She needed my answer for herself and for them too. Hey, she said, we were just wondering how you made it through, and we didn't. I shook my head. I had never thought about having never been hit and what it might have made me sound like. You know how many times I've been stabbed, she asked me. She raised her blouse all the way to her breasts, the cuts on her resembling some kind of grotesque wallpaper. Hey, how many women are there like you? Then I knew for sure. She had been sent in from the Philly cold by the others on the train to listen, to stand up close, to make me out as best she could. She put my hand over top hers, asked could we stand up straight back to straight back, measure out our differences right there and then. She gathered it all up, wrote down the things she could, remembering the rest to the trainload of us waiting out back for answers, full to the brim with every age of woman, every neighborhood of woman whose name had already been forgotten. The train blew its whistle. She started to hurry. I moved towards her and we stood back to back, her hand grazing the top of our heads, my hand measuring out our same widths, each of us recognizing the brown woman latitudes, the black woman longitudes in each other. I turned around, held up my shirt, and brought my smooth belly into her scarred one, our navels pressing, marking out some kind of new equatorial lines. The aureole. I stop my hand midair. If I touch her there, everything about me will be true. The new world discovered without pick or axe. I will be what Brenda Jones was stoned for in 1969. I saw it as a girl, but didn't know I was taking in myself. My hand remembers treading the watery room just behind the rose-veiled eyes of memory. Alone in the yard, tucked beneath the hood of her car, lucky clover all about her feet, green tea sweet necklace for her mud pie crusty work boots. She fends off their spit and words with silent two-handed twists and turns of her socket wrench, a hurl of sticks and stones, and only me to whisper for her from sidewalk far, break my bones. A grown woman in grease pocket overalls, inside her own sexy transmission, despite the crowding of hurled red hots. Beneath the hood of her candy apple Camaro, souped, shiny, low to the ground. 2. The stars over the Atlantic are dangling salt crystals. The room at the Seashell Inn is $20 a night, special winter off-season rate. No one else here but us and the night clerk, 5 floors below, alone with his cherished stack of Spider-Man. My lips are red snails in a primal search for every constellation hiding in the sky of your body. My hand waits for permission for my life to agree to be changed forever. Can Captain Night Clerk hear my fingers tambourining you there on the moon? Won't he soon climb the stairs and bam on the hood of this car? You are a woman with film reels for eyes. Years of long talking have brought us to the land of the body. Our skin is one endless prayer bead of brown. If my hand ever lands, I will fly past dreaming Australian Aborigines. The old claw hammer and monkey wrench that flew at Brenda Jones will fly across the yard of ocean at me. A grease rag will be thrust into my painter's pants against my will. I will never be able to wash or peel any of this away. Before the night is over, someone I do not know will want the keys to my '55 silver Thunderbird. He will chase me down the street. A gaggle of spooked hens will fly up in my grandmother's yard, never to lay another egg, just as I am jumped, kneed, pulled finally to the high ground of sweet clover. My grandmother, people always ask me, especially my students, like, how did you become a poet? And one of those answers, the big answer, really is my grandmother. I was lucky enough to be holding her hand when she crossed over at the age of 99. She could have been 100 because she lied a lot about her age. But I try not to hold that against her as I get older. But she taught me to listen to the world and I spent my summers with her. And my sense of the sensual world, I was what my mom called her sensitive child, which I always thought that was bad news when she said it, right? She didn't say it in a way that seemed like it was really good. It was always when I did something wrong or different. And I wrote an essay called Hog Killing, because I was the child and the grandchild who ran into the woods when the farmers came to kill the hog every Thanksgiving. I couldn't stand the sound of the hog being hoisted and before his throat was slit. So I wrote this essay, and in it I realized that I became a poet because I was the sensitive child. And so I read that essay at the University of California at Berkeley, and I met so many sensitive children in the audience. It was so great. They were like, we should form a society. I was like, yeah, let's get an island or something. So my grandmother had a sister named Aunt Alice, and we had just come back from her funeral. And I tell my students that you don't have to look far for poems. They're everywhere. You have to just see the poem in the moment and be willing to write it down. This is called Alice Butler. We stand shoulder to waist in her backyard. I am leaving, something my grandmother says I do very well. We have come from burying her favorite sister. Beulah Davenport has outlived them all. A white dove resembling a lost bird off a soapbox lands on the mean neighbor's roof 200 feet away. We rarely look that way unless we have to. We have to. The white bird we both know has never set foot in the air of South Carolina before. We know this without saying a word into that air. Never have we seen so white a bird before. In the middle of remembering the white and yellow flowers of the service, the white bird has landed smack dab in the middle of our sad joy. She looked real good, grandmother had just pronounced. Right then, the whiter than white bird, which had never before set wing or beak in the air of South Carolina, began his march down the cold lip of the mean neighbor's tin roof, landing finally on the speckled rim of the wash tub. Now the whiter than white bird is as close as a kiss we both want to know. All sweet funerary talk has stopped. My grandmother is 95. Nothing on her trembles, but this, the whitest bird in the world, prancing about on a tin tub in South Carolina, makes her. In a voice borrowed from a diamond miner, carefully she taps, breaking the air into baby blue shards. Alice, sister, is that you? I do not move, comfort, or join in this moment in any way. All around us is lavishly private. This is more delicate than the lace around this old woman's favorite sitting chair in the front room of the white clapboard house leaning just behind us. For 3 days, the granddaughter, who by then has lived up to what she is best known for, is her usual 400 miles away when she gets her 3 o'clock call. The pearl white bird report comes in like regular RCA Victor news, spoken from the crackling wired fabric of voice box and ears. On the 4th day, the call arrives a little later. The diamond miner's voice has dug down now, a few feet deeper. I am the oldest granddaughter. It is a report given for only me to hear. Child, she says, she's all the way across now. She just wanted to let me know she made it free and clear. Beulah, she told me, when you get here, remember, heaven will only let you out to pass back good news. So my great teachers taught me that everything is political. And I've been talking about that for the last 30 years of my life. And I heard a story about a 19-year-old young black woman from Florissant, Missouri, who was the first to die in Iraq from Missouri. And there's a very important video about her life on YouTube called The Silent, I'll think of it, something that you should see. And I'd like to tell you who she is. This is called Florissant for Lavina Johnson, 19. Before or after he used the back end of an M16 and struck her in the face, before or after he took his fist and knocked her 19-year-old teeth out, breaking her nose, before that, the Florissant, Missouri honors student who loved to play the violin, who every year made time to walk for the American Heart Association, decided to put college off for a while, decided to serve her country first, enlisted in the Army. She was deployed straight away for Balid, Iraq, where for all of her 6 weeks she was a communications specialist. Lavina called home every day, her mother, Linda, answering, so glad to hear her happy, upbeat daughter say, "Mama, I think I might be coming home early." The 5'1" 101-pound American Heart Association volunteer was found in a burning tent with bite marks on her upper body. The arm and elbow that once held her violin, now broken and distended, her 19-year-old genital area badly bruised, lacerated, the Army report read. Before he struck his match, this the only time he was dutiful, careful, sincere, lifting her hips with one hand to pour hot lye into her womb, clearing all evidence away of his having been there. After all this, the Army report read, suicide. Dr. John Johnson, father of Lavina, filed for his freedom of information, then wrote another report. Let's call it the father report. A report a father should never have to write. A report a country should write. The Army reported the bullet hole was found on the left side of her head, and it was made by Lavina's Army-issued M16. My Lavina was right-handed, the father report reported. How do you take a 40-inch M16 when you are right-handed and curl your 5'1" arm magically around in the air and shoot yourself on the left side of your head? The Army man, the father, will tell you much more if you have the stomach for the details, if your love for your country does not impair your higher affection for the facts. The hole in Lavina's head was made by a pistol, an unfound, unlooked-for pistol. Dr. John and Linda Johnson made the Army release the photographs from the murder scene. The pictures show the bloody path where Lavina was dragged through the woods to the tent. The pictures show the remains of dry Iraqi flowers and leaves stuck to Lavina's body as if she was dragged a long, long way. The Army reported that the tent belonged to KBR, private military war contractor, child of Halliburton, and that is when and where the path quickly trails off. The tent was burning, Dr. Johnson's broken heart and strong voice tells CBS Morning News. The tent was burning. In the burning tent, Lavina Johnson's 19-year-old body was fully dressed, ready, as if for the day's full inspection, even though there was only one white dress glove on her right hand, glued into place. There are no warning signs nailed over recruitment doors for 19-year-old honor students who grow up believing they should make time in their lives to walk for others, fighting for a better world made of stronger hearts. There are no warning signs nailed over recruitment doors for 19-year-old honor students who grow up loving the violin. The dotted line you signed, Lavina, should have included the report that your father didn't know about until after he saw your autopsy photos. The report that every mother and father and family of every daughter signing up must now learn by heart. Tonight, with your hand over your heart, repeat after me. Every woman entering these gates has a higher chance of being raped than being killed by enemy fire. Thank you very much. So that last poem was written about a year ago when I heard about the story about Lavina Johnson. And I was reading it to an audience, and in the audience was a reporter for the Guardian newspaper. And she asked if she could reprint it in the Guardian, and I gave her permission. And shortly after that, they did an article, came the congressional hearing on women in the military, which happened last year. And the person who was chairing that committee asked, could she take that poem and submit it into the congressional record on behalf of Lavina Johnson, in hoping that it would make a difference during that congressional hearing. Well, it didn't make a difference if you followed the hearing. Lavina Johnson was one name. There are hundreds of names. There are hundreds of women who have been raped or killed, or raped and killed in the military, and it's one of the biggest secrets, things undiscussed in our country. And I feel as a poet, we can talk about this if you like, but I feel as a poet a great honor to be able to find a story like that of Lavina Johnson and bring it to you, because you might not have known about it, and maybe there is somebody listening who can take it someplace else. I tell my students all the time that your anger will get you nowhere as a poet, as an artist. Your rant will get you nowhere with art. But if you can find a way to take how you feel about something that perhaps makes you angry or furious and turn it into art, then that is your job. I don't know if you want to put the house lights up, or if maybe, so I can see you. Thank you for listening. There's a quote in the back of Head Off and Split that I love by one of my favorite philosophers, Simone Weil, who said, absolutely unmixed attention is prayer. I know, right? I like that. So you signed a piece of paper that said you would come in and ask a question. Didn't you? This is my favorite part, so you can't go anywhere until you. Bao, do you have something?
Yeah, so you won the National Book Award, and obviously the National Book Awards just happened a few days ago. We all know what happened there, and you actually wrote a really wonderful response to it.
Well, thank you. I really prefer to be a poet in the world and not a blogger or a commentator. But, commentate by way of poetry and not commentate by way of my website or something, because I don't follow social media. But I was so kicked in the belly that night as I watched the computer and listened. And I thought, well, somebody is going to take one of those shepherd hooks and just pull him off the stage. This cannot possibly continue, right? This is 2014. Somebody's going to tackle him or something. Nothing happened except laughter, and, well, there was some. If you listen, you could really hear, and whether it was nervous or not, I just thought, gosh, now I got to spend my entire evening. I'm a turtle writer. I write really slow. It's going to take me all night to write this piece. I could be writing a poem, right? But I couldn't sleep. I could hardly breathe because I thought, here's this great moment that I knew firsthand. You leave the stage, your life has changed forever. And I felt like as she left the stage, like darts were being thrown at her back or worse, and I thought, okay, I have to write something. And I didn't know what I wanted to say just then, but I had and this is how I love this part about creation and creating things. I was listening to Lauryn Hill, right? And if you pay attention to the world you're in, you don't have to look for, how am I going to start this? She said the line, I went, this is where I start, reciprocity. And so I put that at the title, and I just started thinking. And of course, my grandmother always comes to me at times like these, and stories that I have that shaped me into into who I am. And I thought, well, let me back up. I actually wrote the National Book Foundation and talked to somebody there. And I said, okay, this could be made a lot better, if you apologize. This isn't, it would just help. And I hit a stone wall when I said that, and they were like, well, we didn't do anything wrong. That's not what you were supposed to say. Now I got to go write this thing. And then the next morning, I don't know if I had anything to do with this. I'm not claiming that I did. But when I was told no, that there would be no apology, and I wrote the piece, then the next morning there were 3 lines on the website there was an apology to Jacqueline Woodson. It was short, but it was there. And so I felt like I had, taken my whole night to write this piece, but maybe something good can happen in the future. And there's been so many, I call people, Miss Clifton, Lucille Clifton used to say, people in my tribe, and so I've kind of adopted that since she passed. And I've heard from so many people of my tribe who all around the world and the country, Egypt and other places, who've written in to be astounded along with me to say, how come nobody pulled him off stage with a shepherd hook? And there have been some other people who thought that, I shouldn't have said what I said, and I shouldn't have written anything, and that I was told by some guy that I was only trying to further my career. But this is, when you put yourself out in the world, this comes back. So you have to be. I tell my students, if you draw a line in the sand, you're going to get people coming at you from all angles, and you have to. I can still have a tender heart, but I need a tough skin to be in the world and to do the work that I do. And I think you have to have that as a poet and an artist. You have to be willing to say things that, make people a little uncomfortable, and enter the arena. Toni Bambara, my great teacher, said, "Do not leave the arena to the fools." I live by that every day, and I thought about that. I was like, okay, there's an arena. I got to step in. And I can be my kind, tender-hearted, well-raised Southern girl self and still light a fire. You can do both. Yes.
Your poems are long.
Yeah, I'm long-winded, sorry.
I'm just curious, process, how long do you have to live with those poems before you work with them? Is it one draft? Is it 20 drafts? Tell us,
There's no one draft poem for me. I hope, I'd love for anybody to tell me how that's done, but it's like a piece of wood. It's like I grew up around men and women who use their hands at things, so I think of it metaphorically and visually and other ways as whittling. And so I have a piece of wood, and if I keep whittling, there's the nose, the lips come out, the hair. You got to be careful, though, as you get the image or the thing that you want, the visual, because you can break the wood. So once you learn how to do that, and if that's what I'm doing, then I learn when it's done. I see what I want to see. I'm incredibly visual as a person, and so when I begin to see what I'm talking about on the page, then my hand gets a little lighter. But it's many years, a couple of years of work and putting things away, and also delicate. When I was 9, I used to walk around with a book on paleontology in my back pocket because I wanted to be a paleontologist. And I knew every dinosaur that ever walked or flew on the earth, and I knew how big their brains were and what they ate for dinner. And this is why I got my mom called me her sensitive child. Luckily, she didn't put me away somewhere at the same time. But Paleontology tools, I knew like the little brush and the little pick. Those are really important to me as a poet as well. So when I'm like digging for something, I think about those tools and metaphorically or figuratively and try to use them. Also, photography is really important to me. I'd rather be on that side of that camera. Sorry. But when I teach writing, I teach with lenses. So if I'm writing about Lavina Johnson and I want to go close to her, then I use a telephoto lens. And if I want to back up and talk about the tent she was in, then I use a wide angle. And if I want to implore some sort of magical realism, which I love as a reader, then I'll do an underwater lens to sort of make things fuzzy. So again, things in your life that you're kind of passionate about, don't think they can't be writing tools. But I am long-winded. I love a long story. I don't publish much because it takes up the whole journal for like one poem. But I was told that I needed to cut back on those when I was a younger writer, but it became like a voice for me. And so I just stuck with it.
Good answer, thank you.
You're welcome. Arlita?
I know you recently went back to South Carolina.
Well, I fled South Carolina when I was 18 because I didn't think I could become a poet there. And I'm struggling to find out if I can remain a poet there because South Carolina, in many ways, doesn't want to be better than it is. And that has been historical. So I feel good being there. I'm meeting all kinds of great people who are there, progressive-minded, thoughtful, who would like to see South Carolina a little different and not the crazy people on TV yelling to the president to shut up or sit down or, some stuff like that. But it's my folks are there. My dad's 84, my mom's 81, and they were principal in my return. So if you hear about the poet leaving in the middle of the night, you'll know that I didn't make it. I just had to get out. I tried, but I'll come to Minnesota. Yes.
So you wrote a tribute to Toni, Cade, Bambara.
Yeah.
Can you speak about some of the influence?
Yeah. I hope you know Toni Cade Bambara's name. I hope you know. She's a great American short story writer who died in 1995. And I was so lucky to be in Atlanta when she lived in Atlanta, and she held a writing workshop in her house on Simpson Avenue. And I had read all of her work in college, and I had never been in a writing workshop before because we didn't have that at my little school. And she had nurses and bus drivers and students, just community people in this workshop. But it wasn't just a writing workshop. So we were leaving one day and walking down the street to the bus stop, and this bus driver's coming towards us, and he says, "Hey, are you that writer woman?" Because there had been an article in the paper about her. And I thought, oh, wow, he's going to ask for her autograph. This is a great moment. I get to witness this. And she goes, "Yeah, I'm that writer woman." And he goes, and he pulls out these papers out of his pocket, and he goes, "Well, me and my wife are trying to buy a house. And I don't write or read so well. Can you help me?" She said, and I was about to say in my schoolgirly, college way, she don't have time for that. This Toni Cade Bambara. Get out the... And she said, "Come to my house at 4 o'clock on Saturday. I'll fill out your papers with you." It changed my whole life. That's what a writer does. A writer takes the time to fill out some house papers. Do you know he got that house? Come on. So Toni Cade changed my life. In those workshops, she stopped one day. I had done my little poetry reading. I was all, prettified language. I was always a lyric poet. I love beautiful language. And she said, "Okay, Nikki, so you can write a pretty poem. So what?" She said, "So what? What's the plan?" I didn't have a plan. I just, pretty words, you know? And I went home that night and I made a 5-year plan. And I said, I want my first book out in 2 years. I want this. And she said, you gotta have a plan. It doesn't matter your little pretty word. It doesn't matter what they are. But you've gotta put them, you've gotta make a plan for them. And she embarrassed me in that, not severely, but ever since then, I've had a 5-year plan. I don't always reach those things, but on my wall and some over the desk, there's something I need to accomplish in that time, and it's helped me tremendously. So I pass on that Toni Cade Bambara to you because it does work. It does work. I see a question on your face. You, gold sweater, don't turn around. No?
No, I just was really resonating with what you were talking about, and I just really have to be present. I'm not a writer, although I have to work, but
Yeah.
and I just feel like the real beauty in my life is when I just spend time writing.
Yeah, yeah. The article he's talking about there's a great tribute to Toni Cade Bambara. It's her 75th birthday year. And all on the Feminist Wire, they've had like tribute every day. There must be 30 now of people remembering her. And another of those stories, after we would have workshop every first Sunday in her house. And we would get there at 12, and whoever was there, so sometimes we'd stay till 4, sometimes till 8, sometimes till midnight. She just kind of went to bed or, left us in the room to do what it did. The house was a mess. You couldn't find anything. There were teacups. You'd have to wash out your own teacup. But work happened in that house. It was a writer's house. So we went till 8 o'clock that night, and she called me at 2. And she said, Nikki, I need you to come pick me up, because she didn't drive. She didn't have a car. And she didn't tell me why, and I didn't ask. I just got my pajamas. I put my jacket on, and I went to Toni Cade's house. And so she was standing outside. She came out. She got in the car, and she goes, we're going to pick up. And in the article, I leave a blank because I don't want to say her name. And I was like, what happened? And she said, remember that cute guy who started working at the co-op? And I said, yeah. She said, well, he's hitting her. And so we're going to get her. And I was like, oh, okay. So I drive over, and she's standing outside with 4. She said, I told her to be outside with everything she could carry with her in pillowcases. So there were 4 pillowcases, and there's a person from the workshop, and she comes and gets in the car in the back seat. Nobody says a word. I drive them to Toni Cade's house, and I was like, what if he comes? And she said, he's not coming. And this young writer lived with her for like 8 months until she could get her life together. And that was a lesson. If you have something, you can share it with somebody else. It's better than, just not the technical knowledge of writing. But if you've got a couch and somebody needs to get out of a situation, and that has been my MO also. So life lessons from Toni Cade extend far into the future. And if you read those tributes, at her memorial service, there were people who met her in the elevator when she moved to Philadelphia. And they said, I didn't know she was all famous writer and all that. She just made me go back and get my GED. That was Toni Cade. She would meet you and she was like Afro-future. She was like Afro, big earrings. She walked around in like Cinderella shoes with glass heels and Guatemalan shawls around her. And she would come in the room and you would just say, damn, who is that? But if you were in a place with her like an elevator, she would go, what's your name, sister? And I'm Jamila, I'm 19. You in school, you working, what you doing? And by the time the elevator doors opened, you were back in school. You knew, you weren't the same person. And so at her memorial service at the Painted Bride, this long line of people, like all ages, shapes, just stumbling up to the microphone to testify that this writer woman had touched their lives in this tiny little way. Gave somebody $5 at the bus stop, You know, and people found out she died, and they had to come and say something. So I said, that's a legacy. That's a real legacy. So I hope you go and read that. Yes. Nobody else? Yes, Arlita?
So Jimmy Blues came out earlier.
Yeah.
And you asked to write the introduction for the reading.
Oh.
How did you prepare yourself for that?
Well, first I cried a long, long time because James Baldwin stopped the world for a minute. Just let us say his name because he was my great teacher too. Didn't know him, never met him, saw him one time before he passed. But as a girl child, I read everything he wrote and just thought nobody was speaking the truth. And when I was writing that essay the other day, I was thinking of Baldwin and thinking about how sometimes you have to say the hard thing into the moment. But when I was asked by Beacon Press to write the introduction for this book that is the only compilation of all his poetry, you know, I don't know, that you can't prepare for that. But I had seen this documentary on Baldwin in San Francisco many years before by KQED, shot by KQED, where Baldwin is surrounded by all these young black men on the corner. And Baldwin, and I end the essay this way, and Baldwin says, the young men say to Baldwin, there'll never be a black president in America. 1968. Never. I mean, they're like adamant. And Baldwin says, why? Why are you saying that, man? He said, I can't get a job today as a black man. How is there ever going to be a black president? And I was like, wow. Come on. So that ends the essay in talking about how visionary Baldwin was and how we need him today more than ever. And we have to pick up all those essays and things that he said and carry them forward because we all need them and the country needs them too. Yeah. Sure. Yes.
I just wanted to go back to South Carolina for a minute.
Okay, if I have to.
You write a lot about ancestors and family in your work, and I'm just wondering if being there in ways that for you, does it make you closer? Does it come?
You know what I found as a writer is the real big thing for me is perspective. Like I had to leave South Carolina in order to write about it. And I haven't written about South Carolina since I returned to it. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to keep writing about it because it's like this. And sometimes you need to be over there and writing about it in order to have that distance and that objectivity, but also subjectivity. So, and I'm writing different things now. I'm not writing so much about home and ancestors and family. I'm writing different kinds of things that I don't necessarily have to be in South Carolina to write. So I'm not sure what the effect will be since I've been back this last year. I'm working on something right now. Well, actually, I finished it. I call it a radical libretto because I couldn't write a real kind of traditional libretto. I kept kind of going out of the margins. But there's this celebration happening. It's called the sesquicentennial end of the Civil War. And it's happening now. It's happening next year, 2015, the 150th anniversary. And so they asked 4 schools, University of Maryland, Emory, some other schools, to write a creative piece or do a creative piece in celebration. So I'm working with Terrence Blanchard, the Kronos Quartet, and Nikky Finney's Radical Libretto. And the Kronos Quartet guy, David Harrington, is how I got involved. He was up because he doesn't sleep like so many musicians and artists, and he was watching C-SPAN, and he saw the National Book Award acceptance speech. And he said, I want to work with her. And so when he got commissioned to do the piece for University of Maryland, he called and asked would I write something. And that's kind of the power of the National Book Award in a way. I mean, there's so many things about it, but it gives you a completely different audience. And then you have to rise to the occasion of that audience. So that's going to happen September 26th. It was going to happen on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I'm so glad they changed that. And now it's going to happen at the Clarice Smith Center in Maryland at the end of September 2015. and there's a 300-voice choir, and the choir will sing some of the libretto, and we're going to have a night of music. And I wrote this piece called The Ballad of the Blackface Boy, and I started it because of all the killings and murders that were happening to young black men in America. Started long before Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and others. And so it really talks about the history of enslavement of black people, but also focuses on the male, the African-American male person in this 200-year history. And that was the story behind the writing of that. It's a 10-page poem, long-winded again. And so we'll see how that goes in September. Last question? Yes.
Firstly, I'm grateful this is the first time I was introduced to your work, so I feel really honored to be here, and I'm glad that you're here.
Thank you.
The poem that really resonated with me is you write like a black woman who has never been hit before.
Yeah.
And what I see in my mind is a sister in the back of the room with her coat on, she's like all bundled up, and what I see is protected. And then you're standing at the front of the room, warm. I'm thinking you got a little scarf on. You know, I'm thinking about.
Often I do, yes.
How open you are and how she waited to see you and how sacred it was for her to reveal her scars to you.
Yep.
And I feel like there's a lot of brothers and sisters out there that are so protected in wearing their coats and are unable to unzip, and they have to catch that train. They have somewhere else to go.
Right.
And I just appreciate the vulnerability of her.
Yeah.
And I don't know where this question comes from, and I don't know where you, like, how you answer. I don't even know how I would answer it. Is where do you find your freedom?
You said it, you know, like everything, like if there was ever a poem that didn't need 20 drafts, that was the poem in my life. I just lived it. She came, walked up. I went back to the hotel and just wrote what happened, right? And she stood there and wanted to hear. She walked up because she heard something honest or something she didn't, you know, she couldn't make heads or tails of. And so my freedom is in the courage to say the hard thing in a beautiful way. If I didn't write that piece about the National Book Awards a couple of nights ago, I might not be here right now. I don't know that I'd be breathing. I find that if I can write it, it's like, you know, it punctures the sort of pain and fury and allows air and oxygen and sunshine and stuff to come. So my freedom is in writing. My freedom is in writing close to the bone, is in saying the hard things that I've been taught. You've got to figure out how to say this, and you've got to make it beautiful because it's art. And so I feel like the luckiest girl in the world to be able to do that and then come and stand before an audience like this and let you know who I am and then, you know, go back home and call that work. It is work. You know, it's work, but it's like a beautiful work. That's what it is. Yeah.